Hello guys, welcome to Redditor's Revenge. Here we post amazing revenge stories daily. And if you want more content like this, please do subscribe to the channel and stay tuned with us. Moving on to today's first story, in which OP exacted his vengeance on his sister-in-law for what she done to his dog, so she got a taste of her own medicine. Now story. I'm a 42 years old married man devoted to my dog. My wife and I can't have children, so little by little he became the center of our lives and our love. I work as the bodyguard of a very powerful man in our city. This has allowed me to live a pretty high standard of life for which I'm grateful, even with all the questionable deeds I have found myself doing for the sake of keeping my job and my boss's trust. A topic on which I don't plan to extend myself further. When something rubs me the wrong way, I tend to escalate things until I can send a clear message to not mess with me or the things I love. That's why I couldn't slip under the rug what my sister-in-law did to my dog recently. I believe in mutual help. I think that if I give my best to someone that asks a favor from me, it is only fair that that person succeeds in meeting what it's expected from them when they are asked for a favor too, right? But when they betray that trust, I can't help but feel disrespected. My sister-in-law has a couple of beautiful babies. She is a 22 years old carefree and immature young woman that spends her time partying and squandering her husband's money on clothing and whatnot. From time to time, when I'm free in my schedule, I offer myself to take care of her babies when she goes out and her husband is out of town. Sometimes my wife joins me and we have a great time looking after them, playing with them, and feeding them. Then she comes back to the house, late at night, smelling like cigarettes and vodka. My wife scolds her a little and I just remain silent. I'm not the kind of person that bulges into anyone else's life, acting like I'm better or something. One day I had to go on a work trip overseas. My boss insisted on me taking my wife, so there wouldn't be anyone in our house to take care of our dear dog. It's a gorgeous small poodle, easygoing and affectionate, a baby that wouldn't harm a fly. I asked my sister-in-law to check in on him and feed him during the 3 days we weren't going to be around. I thought it was a fair favor to ask since we have done so much for her and her daughters. She accepted. I gave her a tour around the house and instructed her to come to my house daily and make sure our dog would eat and hang around with her. Take a walk. Maybe play with her a little. Not so hard of a task. She assured me she would do as told, and I went on my trip with ease of mind, trusting that she would keep my dog safe and such. We went and took care of our business overseas. Nothing unparticular overall. When we came back to our house, we found our dog lying down and struggling to breathe. Our wooden chairs had his bite marks and his eating and drinking plate were empty. I approached my dog and tears poured out of my eyes. We immediately took him to our trusted veterinarian. The veterinarian gave our dog IV therapy to deal with the dehydration, while he told us these were symptoms of malnourishment and heavy stress. My wife was filled with anger. She was going to call my sister-in-law, but I told her not to. She asked me why and I just told her I would deal with this. She was determined to never talk to her again. I said just pretend nothing happened for the moment. Okay, I'm going to deal with her, don't worry. She had always trusted my decisions, but at the moment she couldn't keep herself from being mad at me as well since she didn't know what I was about to do. We went back to the house. I checked the security cameras just to confirm what I had thought. She didn't go to my house not even once during the 3 days I left her in charge of my dog. A couple of days later, after things settled down a bit, I invited her to our house. My wife avoided being there with her, so she just went out to a mall. I spoke to her. I pretended like nothing was wrong at all. I thanked her for taking care of my dog. I wanted to see what she would say. She told me it was no problem at all. She told me that my dog behaved pretty well and that he was just a sweetheart. She told me that she enjoyed being around him. I smiled and poured some drinks, gave her some canapes. We talked for a while about life, her daughters, etc. Then I invited her to spend a few days at this old cabin my grandparents had. A cozy place in the middle of the forest, about an hour away from the town. She could invite some of her friends. We could invite some of our friends and have a great escapade from the daily routine of the city. She agreed and seemed excited. We set a date. The trip would take place the next week. I bought my wife tickets for that week to go on a trip to somewhere else entirely. She agreed and made me promise I wouldn't leave our dog in the hands of her sister-in-law. I told her, of course, I never would do that again. The week of our trip came. I took my wife to the airport and wished her a fun time. I went back home, packed my luggage, and took my dog in the car with me. Then I picked up my sister-in-law at her house. She hired a babysitter for her daughters. When I went to her house, she was giving her instructions to take care of them, their sleep habits and favorite TV channels, etc. Then she got into my car with her luggage and we drove off. It was a peaceful drive. My sister-in-law fell asleep as soon as we were out of the city. I made a stop at a shop in the nearest town to where the cabin was located and bought a few extra dog food for something I had planned. We arrived at the cabin. We had a live-in housekeeper that we had hired to keep things tidy while we weren't there, so luckily there wasn't much of a mess to deal with. I told the maid that she could stay with her family for the week and that we would take care of the house. I sent her off with a generous tip and started arranging the things in the house for the party. I told my sister-in-law that she could rest and enjoy nature around the cabin while I got everything ready. The guest would arrive at around 7 p.m. and it was still noon. I made her a good lunch and cooked some carbonara pasta with a side of garlic mushrooms and bread. I enjoy cooking as one of my hobbies. When we finished eating, she went to her room and fell asleep. We had a little basement outside the cabin, a few meters away. I went over there and placed the dog food I had just bought, along with a tin can opener. The night came and the guests started arriving. We played some music and had some drinks, then we did a few drinking games and even had karaoke. Everyone was having a great time. My sister-in-law was getting a bit drunk, so I figured the time was coming for my plan to take place. At around 2 a.m. I went to her and asked her to please look for some special liquor bottles I had up in the basement. She didn't know where it was, so I gave her indications. She left the house and I quietly followed her up to the basement door. She went in and turned up the lights. I heard her steps going down in there and I quietly locked the door behind her. I used a very bulky padlock we had there to prevent any thefts while no one was in the house. Then I went back to the party. An hour went by and people started asking me where my sister-in-law had gone. I told them she was very tired and had gone to sleep in his room. We kept drinking and laughing until it was time for everyone to go to their homes or their respective hotel rooms back in town. They sent their goodbyes to my sister-in-law and I gladly said I would forward them to her. Then I went to sleep with my dear dog. When everything became quiet, I could hear the knocking and the screaming coming out from the basement door. But after a while everything became silent and I got to have a good night's sleep. The next day I woke up and had a pretty yummy breakfast. Benedict eggs with a side of bacon and garlic bread. And to top it all, a glass of fine wine. Then I remembered that we didn't have any liquor in the basement and had a laugh. I went to town, bought some groceries, and picked up the newspaper. I came back to the house, took a chair, and placed it a few meters away from the basement door. Grabbed me an ashtray too so I could have a little smoke while reading the news in front of the door. From time to time I would hear the usual knocking and screaming from my sister-in-law, but she had grown tired of it, so it wasn't so frequent. I just sat there being quiet and enjoying myself and connecting with the nature around me. At lunch, I made myself some beef stroganoff with some French fries and sauerkraut, had a good serving accompanied by a cold beer. Then I laid down on the couch while reading a book by my dog's side. I had this Albert Camus book I've been wanting to read since forever, The Myth of Sisyphus. I enjoyed it quite a lot. The night came and I went outside just to check how things were going around that basement. Nothing unusual. I could hear her crying inside. It's probably cold in there at that hour of the night in there. She might as well cover herself up with one of the rugs we keep in there, I thought to myself. Then I went back to the house. This routine went on for around 5 days. I thought it was getting dangerous to keep it going any longer. For me, the message had been made clear at that point. She got what she deserved, and now it was time to make her understand it. On the last day, I took my dog in front of the basement door and started playing catch with him. At one point he started barking and a slow knocking and screaming started coming from within the basement. I held my dog up close and told him very quietly, "Can you hear that? That is what happens to anyone that hurts you. I had her taste what you went through. I bet she won't do that again to any other dog for the rest of her life." Her voice was all broken and tired. I went close to the door and said her name. "Oh my God, what are you doing in there?" I said. She couldn't articulate any other phrase than "Open, please." I opened the door and looked at her. "Look at you, you look miserable. What were you doing in there?" I said. She just stammered. She looked malnourished and dirty. She was probably dehydrated too. "I thought you went back home with one of your friends," I said. "I just took the rest of the week to relax in the cabin by myself since I thought you went back home." She just looked at me with a sickening gaze and a little tear running down her cheek. Then I leaned closer and said, "I can't imagine what you went through these days. Must have been awful." She kept trying to ask for water, but I just kept interrupting her. "I bet you couldn't imagine it either. What is it like to spend several days locked with little to no food? I bet it was so awful." Then the fear came to her face. "Can you imagine doing this to someone else, or doing this to a dog, such a pure creature that just brings joy to everyone around him? You really must be a monster to do something like that. Someone that can do this could probably do any sort of awful things with no remorse." "I wouldn't want to imagine that," I said with a little smile. "Let's get you patched up," I said. She couldn't move. She tried to grab onto me, but I leaned away in disgust. I went to the house and made a call to an ambulance using the home phone. There wasn't much reception so deep in the woods. The ambulance came and took her. She spent 2 whole days hospitalized and showed signs of speech impediment. Her vocal cords suffered some trauma. The doctors asked what happened. I told them she locked herself by accident in a basement we had at our house, and no one knew she was there. They understood, and the whole thing was filed as a domestic accident. When my wife asked to see her, she felt sorry for her. Things would have gotten smoother in their relationship if she didn't move away from the state a few months later. I think she is doing better now. I don't know, I haven't seen her since then. The day we saw her leave the hospital. At night, my wife asked me, "Did you do this?" I just told her I didn't know what she was talking about. We never touched the subject again. Now, here is the end of our today's first story. I hope you enjoyed it. And in my opinion, this story escalated very quickly to nuclear. The revenge is quite satisfying, and she gets a taste of her own medicine. But in the end, I felt petty for her. Guys, let me know what you felt and also share your opinion about the story in the comments section. And before moving to the next story, please hit the like button and do subscribe to the channel to stay tuned with us for more awesome stories. Now, moving to our second story, about how my cheating wife left me destitute after I was diagnosed with cancer. So I destroyed her career and relationship and made her homeless. Now story. We dated for 4 years and had what I thought was a great relationship. We were both well-established professionals who both owned homes in the same neighborhood and both with daughters in the home. Her daughter was 11 and mine was 16 when we met. We had planned to get married, build a house, and raise the two together. We planned the house build because she had recently been diagnosed with a neurological disease that would eventually put her in a wheelchair and need something ADA-friendly. During the planning stages, I began doing landscape and construction projects on her home to increase the resale value. All in, I invested roughly $30,000 into the home, running everything through my side construction business for tax, permitting, and resale purposes. We had a contract that payment would be made upon the sale of the home. I produced invoices for every project, but never pushed for payment because of the prior agreement. Fast forward 6 months, we were looking at property to develop and finalize drawings on the home when I began feeling ill. I couldn't eat, constantly vomiting and passing blood. I began noticing that my abdomen looked swollen, which was odd because we were both very clean eaters and were in the gym every day. So I went to the doctor and began having tests done. During this time, she began having small cognitive issues, and the stress of her current position was exacerbating her condition. So she took a $20,000 per annum cut in pay along with a lesser position inside the company. After a month or so of different tests and a biopsy, it came back that I had a golf ball-sized tumor in my stomach and would need to begin chemotherapy. So I began chemo and radiation treatments, which made me, expectedly so, extremely ill. She was spending time helping around my place on the weekends and staying over more, to the point that they were both at my home more than theirs. At this point, I suggested that we go ahead and put one of our houses on the market and move in together until the new house was built. I have great supplemental insurance as well as a long-term illness plan, so using that coupled with the sale of one of our houses would push us through comfortably and help ease the financial stress on her. Shortly after this discussion, she became extremely distant. Her daughter wasn't coming down and hanging out with me anymore. She had excuses for not getting together. She quit driving me to treatments and stopped staying over. She then dropped a bomb, a sentence that will forever be burned into my psyche. "I love you, but I can't see myself taking care of someone this sick in the long term, and I don't think we should see each other any longer." In a text. It broke me, I won't lie. This was the first woman I had ever opened up to and planned a life with since my wife died when my children were 1 and 3. However, I tried to be mature about it. I forced myself to understand her position and to accept what I could not change. I calmly, the next day, gathered all of her things, packed them neatly, loaded them in my truck, and took them to her house to leave on the back porch while she was at work to avoid any awkward exchanges. Walking around the back and under the porch cover, I sat down a box and saw her in her back living room, on the couch having sex with a man that she had introduced to me as a lifelong friend. I had dinner and drinks with this man and his girlfriend. We had gone on vacation with them as well. I never spoke of the incident with her and simply sent her a text later, explaining that I would leave her things on my side porch to pick up at her convenience. I discovered 8 or 9 months later from his now ex-girlfriend that they had broken up due to him confessing that he had been sleeping with my dating back to about the time we were finishing drawings on the new home. Now I'm pissed and wanted revenge. At this point, I had finished chemo and radiation for the time being and was feeling healthier. I was going through some much neglected paperwork when I ran across the file that contained $32,680 in unpaid, long overdue invoices, which were promptly sent to my attorney to begin lien proceedings on the home. It turns out that I couldn't have done this a moment too soon because she was set to put her house on the market. Coupled with interest throughout what was then 19 months overdue, the invoices were hefty. That, along with the agreement of settling them when the house was sold and attorney fees, left her with roughly $10,000 after the sale of the home and settling her current mortgage. She promptly had to back out of the purchase of another home and moved in with her oldest daughter, Sal, and 2 grandchildren. She also had to leave her job and begin receiving disability. I ran into her a little over a year ago, and she looked as if she had aged 20 years, and was in the wheelchair we had talked about. We chatted cordially but briefly and I excused myself and went on with my day. A few days later, her younger daughter called me and spoke of my running into her mom, and whether could we hang out sometime. I gave a vague answer, thanked her for calling, and again went on with my day. The ex then called me a week or so later, and began apologizing for leaving me as she did. Again, cordial but short, I thanked her for calling and hung up. She began texting and this went on for several weeks until one she asked if I could ever see us rekindling what we had. To which I replied, I can't see myself taking care of someone so sick in the long term. Remember the box on your back porch? Did you think that your lifelong friend brought that over to you from my house? Good luck to you. Goodbye. Now, here is the end of our today's video. I hope you are enjoying my content. Guys, let me know your story with such selfish people or the opinion about this story in the comments section. And before leaving, please hit the like button and do subscribe to the channel to stay tuned with us for more awesome stories.